I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Maggie Thompson is presenting the work titled The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, written by J.J. Hurtak. Maggie Thompson is not validating nor supporting Hurtak's views, epiphanies, visions, beliefs, or words. Maggie Thompson is simply presenting the work as written and is attempting to translate this extraordinarily esoteric work to a common vernacular and understanding. Further, Maggie Thompson understands this work to be solely concerning the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and while Hurtak views his work to be the key or keys to uniting all the world's people under one religion, namely Abrahamic, Maggie Thompson does not support this premise whole cloth. However, this work does give depth and insight into the connection of physics, cosmology, biology, and spirituality, which, for the seeker of divine truth, can be invaluable for the discovery of one's place in the universe, and that may be under the hierarchy of Yahweh, the Ancient of Days, or a hierarchy that exists above or beside such deities, or none altogether. Maggie Thompson implores all seekers of knowledge to, letter A, not accept what a person of authority tells you without validation. This includes looking at critiques and the opposing views with an open mind. Letter B, accept that religion, as well as science and politics, is presented as a means of indoctrination and is always presented with the biases of the overall field or system, the authors of texts, and the presenter, whose goals are to convince you of the, quote, truth, end quote, of their premise or premises. Letter C. It is possible to take insight, truths, and information from a biased work. Any body of work for the purpose of deeper meaning and knowledge must be carefully excavated and carved to glean wisdom. And letter D. No work or bodies of work that is believed by a large group or populace of people should be dismissed out of hand simply because you do not believe it. We live in a diverse time where religious belief takes center stage in the governing of the collected masses. To truly understand the barriers and gateways to your personal success and fulfillment, you must accept that believers of any kind can and will do what is necessary to meet their goals. All right, we are here for the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, Part 30. Can you believe it? Key 2-1-7, pages 329 to 334. This key says, the keys to future government come with the seraphim and the brotherhood. They tell us, quote, rejoice, children of uprightness and light. The kingdom of light comes quickly, end quote. Amen. All right. So before we get started, sorry, I had a little itch there. Before we get started, let me say hi to some folks. Adric is first. He says, it's on. Auntie is here, my favorite auntie with the peace sign. She says, love the picture you used in the sacred geometry shown. I used ChatGPT for that picture. I like doing that, just telling it exactly what I want. Adric says, let's hear it for the dancing Maggies. Adrian says, let's go. Y'all send up good, he means vibes, good vibes so that I don't get hit with baseball hail. Yeah, bad, bad, bad weather going on. Vincent says, hi from Hilo, Hawaii. Hi, Vincent. And Cosmic Surfer TV is here. He says, hello, everyone. Hello to you as well. So let's get started. We're going to break it down. We're going to use multiple concepts, including a little bit of the TVA from Disney's Loki series and the Force from Star Wars to make J.J. Hertog's excessively esoteric work into something not soteric. I will be critiquing his premises as well as offering some guidance because it's become clear that this work is the pinnacle of Christian dispensationalism mixed with Jewish mysticism. So we can dissect this book to understand what the global powers might be up to. So this key focuses on government and the kingdom of light. You always want to hear about government when you talk about God, right? Who's the president going to be? That's what we want to know. Who's going to rule over us? Right? All right. So the full reading is available on this channel. You can listen to it before, after, or not at all, but it is available if you want to listen to the key word for word to know exactly what J.J. Hertog said. Although you don't have to, because I'm going to read some of the highlights and then talk about them. All right, so he says, there is a forming of the new worlds at this time, for there is to be soon existent new planets, and the creator sovereigns of this local universe, known as the Council of 12, have been studying the charts, which are the arrangements of the manifestation of a new physical existence. The Council of 9 has governed this area of physical existence from the beginning of that area of expression from the Father's word. The 9 shall place upon the new realms those, quote, physical souls, end quote, who have perfected themselves upon the earth plane. Those souls who have evolved to the highest point of advancement on earth shall be of the new creation. The key is telling us that future government will be unlike any government of man because it will be governed with the higher mind entities of the great white brotherhood, who even at this time are changing the focal rings of intelligence on the outer lip of this galactic region. That was a lot. And we know that when J.J. Hertog says Great White Brotherhood, we've already shown he is talking race. When he says it, he is talking race. So, okay, well, we'll see where he's going with this. All right, so creations which survive the present time cycle are creations which desire that the species light and life into the image and similitude of the higher evolution, which is the living universe. The materialists who seek to destroy the world and worship the space gods will be like desiccated mud when the foundations of the earth are removed. I don't like that, but it also kind of sounds like the mud flood, doesn't it? Some of you might know what I'm talking about when I say the mud flood, right? Especially when I talk about Tartaria. That sounds like the mud flood. But like anybody who doesn't believe what he's saying is going to be desiccated mud. Woo! So much for being a humanist. All right, so he says, Enoch speaks of this time as the time of the bringing of great spiritual gifts, of prophecies, new sciences, gifts of creation, discoveries, all of the keys which will unlock the scientific records which contain information on how this happened before and how there exist cycles of eternal renewal. This has happened before. And it has. That's already been proven, right? The earth goes through cycles of reaching a level of advancement and evolution and then cataclysm. Okay. This happens over and over and over again. They're called the world enders. These are cataclysms that happen, the cleansing of the earth. When we think of the oldest known human remains, It goes back 7 million years. 7 million. That's the oldest hominid. And we seem to lose hominid types during each cataclysm. And now we are where we are today. But remember, while we're all Homo sapiens, some of us are mixed with Neanderthals, some of us are mixed with Denisovans, some of us are mixed with both. Some don't act like Homo sapiens at all. But we lose some. Heidelbergensis, we lost that one, but we lose these hominid types during these cataclysms. When the hominids start to reproduce again with whomever is left after the cataclysm, it creates a new hominid species. So this happens. It's like every 11,000 years-ish, somewhere in there. So Sahelanthropus chardensis, I think I said it right, was found in Chad. The remains are roughly 7 million years old. That's the oldest one we have found. And because it was fossilized, right? We don't know if there's more hominids before that even, which, it's kind of cool to think of, I guess. Ardipithecus ramidus was found in Ethiopia. Those remains are roughly 4.4 million years old. Hominids have been in Africa for millions of years. Okay. Australopithecus afarensis, also known as Lucy, was found in Ethiopia. Those remains are 3.2 million years old. That was the oldest one for a while, Lucy. They she's Eve, but then we keep finding older hominids. Every time science wants to say something for sure, especially in anthropology, we find out different, right? Okay. Homo erectus fossils have been found in Dmanisi, Georgia, Java, as old as 2 million years. Homo heidelbergensis, which I just talked about, is 600,000 years old. And heidelbergensis is the father of the Homo sapien, the Denisovans, and the Neanderthals. So 600,000 years. Dad. Okay. The Noah line. Okay. If you think about it, heidelbergensis would be Noah's line. He gives birth to Homo sapiens, Denisovans, and Neanderthals. So if you haven't watched my Bloodline series, please do. So when I say, and I have said before, I don't know if specific people with those names were made. These are bloodlines, and this is what they are called, right? We have Noah's line, we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? And the ancient writings tell us what they look like. And Heidelbergensis, Homo sapien, Denisovans, Neanderthals, we know what they look like because of DNA, and they match. So this is why I use it that way. Okay, now, if you take anything away from what we discuss today, let it be this one key phrase. Absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. Let me say it one more time. Absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. So as an example, when archaeologists thought that Lucy was the oldest hominid at 3.2 million years, right? And they said, for sure, there's no other, she is the oldest, there's no other, right? Because there was an absence of evidence to show that there was any hominid older than her. So that was an absence of evidence. There was no evidence to show that there was a hominid older. Problem being, when they say, so there isn't one, is them saying, well, the absence of evidence means that we have evidence of absence. And that's not what it means. If you haven't found evidence of something yet, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And this happens in archaeology all the time. As soon as they say something for sure, definitively, it gets thrown out of the water. Think about it. They thought she was the oldest at 3.2 million years. How bad did she get blown out of the water finding a hominid at 7 million years? Like, that's more than double. So again, just because we haven't found something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Okay. Now, archaeology also assumes that humans advance in a line. This happens all the time in archaeology because they don't talk to anybody else. They don't really talk to a lot of historians or even sociologists or things like that. They assume that evolution and advancement is a straight line. They don't take into account the cataclysms, right? Like, they will look at the technology of the pyramids and say they built pyramids because they thought that the pharaoh could go to heaven on a beetle's back out of the vent hole. And so they buried him in there. They won't take into account everything else, and that maybe this thing that we can't figure out how it was built or how to replicate it, they're so advanced we can't figure it out. They just make up dumb things, right? They can't even fathom that it's technology that is way far advanced. But the cataclysms show that, right? Think about when the Sahara Desert was green, right? There was a tidal wave so big that it dumped sand and created a desert. Think about how big that tidal wave was. And wouldn't we call that a flood? Wouldn't all the people there call that a flood? Right? And everything got wiped out, right? All of it got wiped out. Okay. Archaeologists say we are the most advanced hominids that have ever been right now because they assume advancements go in a straight line and not cyclically. Now, everything in nature moves cyclically. Nothing is moving in a straight line. But they don't want to take that into account. Apparently, advancement is just a straight line, right? So they can't explain any of the ancient structures and how to do them. They don't know anything about them. Think about like where was it that had the stone heads were sticking up from the ground, and people were like, wouldn't it be crazy if they had bodies and it was all a joke, ha ha ha? And archaeologists are like, no, they're stone heads. And then they started digging them out, and it was whole bodies. See how they always get proven wrong, right? So they can't explain the ancient structures, how anything was done. So whenever they can't explain it, they just say it's some religious, pagan, silly thing, right? Because they cannot admit that there were civilizations that were far more advanced than we are right now. They had better technology. They got wiped out. It's too bad. It really is too bad. Because if the theories are right, then Egypt and several other places had free energy. So it really is too bad, right? So life, everything, circular, not linear. So again, the thing I want you to take away is absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. Okay. Just because you haven't found it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Easter Island. Thank you, Vincent. So things rise and fall, just like all civilizations rise and fall. It is not linear. Emotions rise and fall. Breath goes in and out. We see this circular nature of everything every day in every way. But somehow advancement is linear. We're the best and we're the smartest right now. Yeah, we can't explain how the pyramids were built. How, if we are the most smartest ever and the most advanced, can we not explain what ancient people did? It's not logical, right? What it is academic supremacy and moral supremacy. That's what it is. By saying we are the most advanced and the bestest ever right now, that is supremacy. Spain Man says, I'm sure there's a quote on this, but wisdom is surely more about being honest about what you really don't know. I could not agree more. How come we can't just go, I don't know. I don't know how they did it, but it's amazing, right? Not just make shit up. Zahi Hawass, make shit up all the time, right? And thank you for being here, Spain Man. You're not late. You're right on time. You're here right when you were supposed to be. So, one of the quickest ways to hide history and rewrite history is to control the archaeological evidence. Archaeology will say something is definitive or another thing is impossible. They say these things with absolutes until they find more proof. Now, what I've talked, even just the pyramids, there are way more examples. Okay. We have the hominid types, right? That's an example. The pyramids, an example, right? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. A civilization made this ancient architecture 12,000 years ago, right before the last cataclysm, folks. Before it was discovered, archaeologists insisted that agriculture came first, then cities, then temples. They said, without a doubt, definitively, that's how all of it went. Agriculture came first, then the cities, then the temples. Well, here comes Göbekli Tepe, which flipped all of that, right? The stonework and sacred sites were built before farming. They were built first. We got to get this stuff built. Then we can plant our crops and do our farming and do all of this kind of stuff and feed ourselves. We have to build this first. So as soon as archaeology says something definitively, here comes proof that they're wrong. Okay. So it was impossible until it wasn't because somebody else did it. Okay. Nabta Playa in the Sahara Desert, what I just talked about, okay, is 7,000 years old. These are circular stone structures aligned with the stars. No one thought that Saharan pastoralists had astronomy. They thought they were just, running around with a cow, maybe a goat, because we're so much more advanced. They're just, wandering, right? But they knew astronomy and they knew architecture and they knew all of these, all of the mathematics that it would take to do all of these structures, right? So that rewrote African history, right? Because they keep trying to say, well, they're just not advanced, right? And I say this all the time. Homo sapiens came about 380,000 years ago-ish. I think Neanderthals is about 40,000 years ago, and the mutated freckled white people is about 6,000 years ago. I can tell you right now that people in Africa didn't sit around for 370,000 years and wait for white people to show up to all of a sudden become advanced. They were doing 380,000 years. They were already discovered all this stuff and were already doing it. Okay. That's just how advancement works. People don't just sit around and do nothing. Think about in your lifetime, all the advancements that have come about. Okay. So they said the city of Troy was a myth, right? Many times, until they found it, right? They said many times that Tartaria was a myth until Putin. Oops. Until Putin said, I'm going to tell everybody about Tartaria. And then we started finding the maps and the people and the descriptions of these people. So it's still considered a conspiracy theory, even though we found proof. It's one of those things where it's like, as it's flipping from conspiracy theory to truth, you kind of have people on both ends of that spectrum. So they keep saying no other hominids existed before the oldest one they found until they find one that's older. They say that the oldest fossils are the oldest hominids. and then they find older fossils. So that's why I want you to take that away, okay? It's become important again because I want to talk about the Rishat structure in the Sahara, also called the Eye of the Sahara, because academia and archaeology say that it's not a city. They say it's not hominid made. It's concentric circles, measured out concentric circles, right? But archaeology say it just happened. It happened naturally. Okay? It's a huge bullseye-like geological dome. And what they say is that tectonic uplift and erosion 100 million years ago. Archaeologists insist there's no evidence of it being hominid made. They insist, except there is evidence. Plato described that place long ago, including the concentric rings of the city. He described it. He called it Atlantis. Stone tools have been found in the area. Hominid fossils have been found in the area, both from millions of years ago. And all this would have been during the time that the Sahara was green and lush, before the water and the sand got dumped on it. Further, we have no other structures that old to compare its deterioration to, at least not one that was submerged under a giant tsunami and buried in the sand. So to say, well, we don't see the etching and tool marks, how would you? If it's 100 million years ago, 100 million years old, and it got deluged with water and buried with sand, and it sat there for 100 million years, why would you see an etch? That makes no sense. That's just logic, right? But they don't want to think that hominids 100 million years ago in Africa were way more advanced than we are today. They don't want to think it ever, okay? Structures could erode into geology. Don't a lot of things turn into rock? Aren't things fossilized? They turn into geology. And they could erode over 100 million years until they're indistinguishable from the natural features around it. This is millions and millions of years. We have no comparative sample to know what evidence would look like. And they never seem to take into account that the Earth's processes that we see today, like erosion, uplift, and volcanic processes, might and often did work differently in the past than it does today. It's 100 million years ago. The Earth was quite different then, right? And again, I point you back to Plato described this place. He wrote about it, including the concentric circles, okay? Again, the structure was buried under a giant tsunami, so how can they say anything definitively? We can assume hominids we can assume hominids sat around for 7 million years without developing a power tool, right? We're just going to assume that the oldest known hominids, 7 million years, they just sat around and never did anything. They never thought anything. They didn't use their new neocortex for anything. They didn't do any problem solving. They just sat around and grunted, right? In 7 million years, they didn't develop energy. Really? I don't buy it. The ancient Egyptians said cataclysms happen over and over. Graham Hancock, a great person to look at, found proof of cataclysms happening over and over. What possible reason would the powers that be hide that from you? Well, because we're due. We're coming up on when it's time for another cataclysm, and they want you to go to work tomorrow. They're going to build bunkers in the mountains because they don't know what's coming, only that it's coming because everything happens in cycles. But they want you to go to work tomorrow. So they're not going to give you any warning. His Spain man says they're getting them confused with their own history. Yeah. He that sits in the top of the circle, which is probably King Atlas. It is probably King Atlas that was the king of Atlantis. But it would be interesting, if somebody was so inclined to go read Plato's description of Atlantis and see if you see what I see, that he's describing this city in the middle of the desert. And it's called the Rishat structure. Let me tell you, spell Richat, Rishat structure. Okay, let's keep going. I'm done with my monologuing. Adrix says, I want a bunker too. Yeah, me too. Okay, he does go through here and he wrote a song. It's in the full reading. Not doing it right now. All right, he says, the upheavals that are moving upon the face of the earth are in consequence of the great cleansing that is taking place throughout the heavens. I have this idea sometimes of God and these great cataclysms, that this is what this makes me think of. God is like the man who is doing yard work. As he's mowing, he's not paying attention to the grasshoppers and the ladybugs and the other beetles and different things, the roly-polies, and he's destroying their habitat to mow the lawn. And then say he's rinsing off the patio, right? He's spraying it off with water, washing out the windows. He's destroying the habitat of the spiders, right? In the windowsills, in the hose box. Why are they always in the hose box? I don't know. He's drowning things with this water, right? But he's not thinking of those bugs, of those lesser creatures. He's cleaning the patio and he's mowing and he's making his environment nice. And those that survive, survive. And the bugs that listened to the generation before and said, hey, these things are coming, maybe they built their nests and did their things in a place that doesn't get destroyed in the Saturday mowing. I mean, if your lifespan is half a day, a Saturday mowing is how many generations, right? So I think of God in this way sometimes, that this is his backyard. He's going to make things nice every once in a while and spray off the patio. And if we pay attention and we learn things, then we can be places where we won't be destroyed. That's what that makes me think of. And that's just a theory that I have, or a way to think about God. And even I'm saying he, but the power, right? I guess now I need to say a prayer to the bugs next time I do outside work, right? Like you're never going to hear them scream. It's below your resonance, right? I'm sorry, I'm having an emergency alert. Let me look real quick. Sorry about that. We're having baseball size hail. So I'm trying to keep an eye on what's going on. Okay. All right. So I usually say I'm sorry to the bugs and I try not to kill many, but it's my yard. And we are in the creator's yard, if there is such a thing. And sometimes he's got to spray off the patio, right? More alerts. I mean, the electricity may go out before too long. All right, next. And the name of this temple within you, which shall not receive the angel of death, but the angel of light, is called Amen. The quote, Amen, end quote, is identified with the people of God, whether they are at On, Memphis, Beersheba, Bethlehem, Megiddo, or the basin of the Great Salt Lake. Well, he likes Utah, right? He likes the Mormons. What are you going to do? But he's talking about the name Amen. Didn't a deity already have that name? Is he really rewriting that deity, right? They say that in Hebrew, Amen means let it be, or it is so. which makes me think of Star Trek Next Generation, make it so. But Amen was also the god of Egypt and of Thebes with a B. He was the hidden one. That's who Amen was. He was air, wind, and the invisible. He was syncretized with Ra, who is the god of all. Okay. Ra and El are interchangeable, right? Represented by the sun. And then that deity became Amun Ra or Amen Ra. He was later adopted by the Greeks and became Zeus Ammon. Okay. The Hebrew Canaanite religion rises at the same time as Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Okay. This is like 1000 BC. Okay. Brief summary there. We have Akhenaten, who decided that Amun Ra was not the god of all, that it was Aten. Okay. Now, Aten is depicted. Oh, that's Aten right here. It's usually a disc with all these hands that come out. But interestingly enough, that is also a depiction of Yahweh. So, identity theft. But anyway, Aten, he says Aten is the supreme and only God. He was trying to make monotheism. That's why he made his name Akhenaten, Akhenaten, okay? Because the pharaohs were always named after the god, okay? So he's talking about monotheism. He's talking about the god Aten, which sounds almost exactly like Yahweh, right? So then Akhenaten has a son. He's kind of sickly. He names him Tutanat, Tutanaten. It's hard to say, Tutanaten. Okay. Now, this is the same time Moses is climbing a mountain and talking to bushes. Okay. But remember, Moses came out of Egypt during this time when they were trying to create monotheism, when they were trying to create Aten as the supreme God. And the description of Aten is sort of like, if I worship you, you're going to give me blessings. It's very transactional. It's all the stuff. I'm a jealous God. All of that is Aten. Okay. Moses leaves Egypt, takes that stuff with him, gets high on the mountain, talks to a bush, bada boom, bada bing. Here we are. Okay. But the end of that story is Tutanchamun. Okay. When he rises to power, when his dad dies and Tutanchamun becomes Pharaoh, he says, all of that is bullshit. Amun Ra is the highest God. I don't know what my dad was talking about with this Aten thing. And he changes his name to Tutankhamun. Amen, Tutankhamun. Okay? That's King Tut. That's the story of King Tut. It's an interesting story. But supposedly, Moses took Aten out and created this religion of Yahweh. Because remember, before then, they didn't know God's name. So Moses talks to the bush. He says, what's your name? He says, Yahweh, I am what I am. I am that I am, which sounds like Popeye. But it makes you think, if Amun has been the eternal God for that long, or what the Mesopotamians and Sumerians called him Anu, it was very, very similar. Anu, Amun, right? Just like Inanna, Isis, they're very similar, right? Different languages. But does that mean that Amen is the actual eternal God? Interesting to think about. Hi, Nameless. Thanks for being in here. Vincent says, will within a will. Yes. And actually, we're going to talk about that next week. Nameless says, that's interesting. Also, I didn't realize Amen could be understand as let it be. That explains some of the later magus incantations used to invoke rituals and spells. Now, when you say magus, are you talking Zoroastrianism? Because I think they use it as well. Yeah, I think they use it as well. We're also going to talk about chariots of fire next week, Vincent. You're getting ahead. All right, so let's keep going. The family of God will use the true light energy of the Lush to purify the elements of the Earth's atmosphere and to banish death that is known among mortals. So here we are with the Lush again. And I've talked to you guys about Lush, what, 2-3 times now on what Lush is. It is, the energy of humans. It is the soul of humans. And that's what it's always been. So every time he talks about harnessing Lush, I don't think he thinks you know what he's talking about. But now you do, because we've talked about Lush, and his little great white brotherhood wants to harvest all of it. Nameless says, yes, Magus and Magi have an etymological relationship, LOL, and shout out to Zoroastrianisms, indeed. Yes, yeah. And so that's, when they talk about the Magi or the Magi or the Magus who followed the North Star because that's what they do. They're astronomers. They do everything. That's who they're talking about. Adrian says, his brakes are on. He has no baseball-sized knots from the hail. Yay. He made it. That's great. Great. All right. So this Lush life force will be used by this great white brotherhood to rule. In Hertog's timeline, this is after the unrighteous are killed. So whose Lush is he taking? The righteous? And the righteous have to give up their souls. Remember, we've talked, that's part of the keys. You have to give up your soul and allow them to use your body as an avatar. So it would make sense they're going to harvest your Lush. Okay? It doesn't sound good to me. It just doesn't. So I'm going to bring this back to the Force from Star Wars. Because maybe that's what's meant by amen. The Force. Because the Force belongs to all life. It's not given and it's not taken. And especially not taken by some council. Even Luke said the Force does not belong to the Jedi. Hertog sells disempowerment as some sort of devotion. Surrender yourself to the council. But that's what the TVA wanted Loki to do as well. And all variants have to be destroyed. It's the same story. But true guardians protect life. They don't purge it. So either these global cleansings are by a god who requires genocide and wiping people out as he sprays the bugs off of his patio, or these global cataclysms are used by the powers that be as a control mechanism. I have had a theory for a very long time that I think the reason we are where we are now is because a cataclysm happened that they're not telling us about. Hard to say, right? But they want the survivors to survive on purpose. And the rest of us can get sprayed off the patio. I'm not going to do that. Hopefully you won't either. Adrix says, may the Force be with you. And I hope it's with you as well. Luke, I am your father. Okay. I appreciate you guys being here with me. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the keys of Enoch. However, this coming Sunday, super stoked, we're going to get into the missing Hebrews. Now, this may be, it's definitely going to be more than one part, but we'll get as far as we can. Adrian will be my guest again, which is going to be phenomenal. We're going to get into the missing Hebrews, the missing tribes of Israel, and talk about where they are and what they're doing, and bring receipts. So I hope you all can be there this Sunday, but if not, I will see you next Wednesday. So now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.